Welcome to the Linguava podcast, The Invisible Profession, where we give you tools, tips, and resources in medical interpretation and translation that help bring to life our industry and ultimately help improve health outcomes for the limited English proficient communities. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Invisible Profession podcast episode number 14, el episodio número 14. I am super excited today because we have a very special guest. A lot of people have been asking, hey, you've got to get this guy on the podcast because he brings it every time. He's got great energy, great content, and everybody loves him. The hashtag hot sauce interpreter man himself, bam, Mike, the interpreter. Welcome to the podcast. Bonjour.
Bam! Hashtag hot sauce interpreters. Yeah.
Yeah. Great to have you on the show, Mike. Super excited to get to chat with you.
Awesome. Privilege, man. Thank you so much.
I think for interpreters, as you know, it can be really lonely in our field sometimes. And it's really nice to be able to connect with people like yourself, hear their story, and see how they could also expand their career. So I want to get into that a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Because actually, you know what? I found that I started a few years ago using Instagram, right? You use it for personal and in a fun way. And then I started connecting with a community of interpreters on Instagram. And I was so surprised that there was actually, interpreters out there that were on Instagram, and it blew up into something. And then the hashtag started. And that kind of went viral in a sense. And now we're like, 9,000 posts, people following the hashtag. And we created a WhatsApp group of, a certain, like an inner circle of interpreter friends. And it's really been a godsend, really. I would say, honestly, in 2020, most of my work came from networking with interpreters on Instagram, which is pretty amazing. I get more work from Instagram than I do from LinkedIn.
That's really, really fascinating. Well, and I think that's so important for everyone to hear. And I love your content. And it was great to be able to connect with you, and awesome that we're now getting to do this. And after reading your bio too, I think it's really interesting story that you have of how you got started as an interpreter. I think it's really interesting hearing everyone's stories and being able to share that, and hopefully being able to inspire others as well. So you grew up in it was in Quebec?
I was born in Toronto. Okay. My parents are both French Canadians. My father had a business in Toronto for a few years, so I was born there. Because I was born in Ontario, I was allowed to go, because there's a special law here in Quebec that when you're a French Canadian, there was a law back then where you weren't allowed to go to English school. Okay. It was kind of like to protect the language in the Quebec. But because I was born in Toronto, and I had started an English school over there when we came to Quebec very early on. Like, I was 5 or 6 years old. And
Toronto's a beautiful city, by the way. My wife and I just went there a year ago. Beautiful.
Wow.
Absolutely loved it.
Yeah, it is. Well, I'm in Montreal now, but so I was allowed to go to English school. But the thing was, the caveat is that my mother doesn't speak English at all. And she's hearing impaired. She's deaf. And so coming home, I'd speak in French to mom all day, and going to school, speaking English. So I was perfectly immersed in this perfect bilingual world.
Yeah.
In addition, like I said in my little write-up there, is that because my mother was deaf, I had to do a lot of transactions for her over the phone, speaking to the landlord, speaking to, the electrical company, from a very young age, because my father wasn't very present in the home, unfortunately. So I had to do a lot of the communicating for my mother.
Yeah. And
so I found out later about this phenomenon called, child interpreter. And I said, wow, that's it. That's it. That's why I was kind of predisposed to becoming an interpreter without even knowing it, because I was always interpreting for my mother. Yeah. And it was always pretty much, consecutively, right? So you're going back and forth, mom saying something, then repeat it on the phone, and then repeat that back into the French language for my mother. So I was predisposed to it. And then later on at the age of about 13 or 14, I became a Christian. My mother was going to a Christian church, and I accepted the Lord as my savior. And, I grew up in the Christian church. And then later in my, I don't know, like in the late 80s, I was starting to get really involved in church and, volunteering. Yeah. And that we would receive English American speakers to preach in our French Canadian churches. And I had seen other interpreters, and honestly, I was like, oh my gosh, they're doing a really bad job. In my, there were friends of mine or people I knew in the church.
Trying the best you could, I'm sure.
Yeah, I was like, oh my gosh, I think I could do better than that, And I never did this. I never heard about it. I just said, well, I can volunteer. Hey, so I went to see the person in charge of that volunteer program. And I said, listen, I've never done this before. I said, I'm bilingual. Yeah. I said, I have no credentials, no degree, no nothing. But I said, I speak very fast French and English, and I think I can do this. So one day I remember the speaker's name was Mike Murdoch, and he had a very Texas roll accent, and loved the guy. And he was a fast talker. And so in front of like 800 to 1,000 people, they said, okay, Mike, you're interpreting tonight. So it was like, this was like a major conference. It was like a 3-day weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday thing.
Big debut.
My big debut on stage. But what was so funny is because I have no experience, right? So I just show up on the stage and I stand 10 feet away from the speaker, and he starts preaching. I just tell him, I said, give me, sentence by sentence. So we're going back and forth, sentence by sentence. But at one point he stops and he looks at me. He says, Mike, what are you doing over there? Come here. So I come. He says, come closer, come beside me, right? Shoulder to shoulder. So I'm there shoulder to shoulder with him, and he's energetic and going at it, like an American preacher would, and you would expect. And I'm just standing like straight, like a piece of stuck wood, And he says, well, he looks at me, goes, well, Mike, he says, if I jump, you jump. If I move my hands, you move your hands. And he's telling this in front of 800 to 1,000 people. He says, Mike, says, if I move, you move. If I jump, you jump. If I scream, you scream. He says, if I laugh, you laugh. And so I said, oh, I could do that. That's like acting. So I said, sure, I could act that out. So I started interpreting as more with the mindset of like, I'm acting out what this guy is doing.
Really mirroring it. Yeah.
And I can't explain it besides the fact, between Christians, we know that anointing factor, the factor of that I just had it. It was like natural. It came like, it was amazing. And it was kind of like a hit in the sense that they were always asking me after that to do that. And I kind of like really rolled into it easily. And with one of the guys, I was actually saying we had the chip, that interpreter chip in the mind, right? So it was just it was a gift. I call it a gift of God, really, because it's been a blessing in my life to the highest degree. And then more and more preachers came coming, and I kept interpreting consecutively like that. And then sometime down the road, at one of those conferences, an interpreter came up to me and said, hey, Mike, he says, where do you work? I've never seen you before. I said, work? You can make money with this?
Yeah.
He says, yeah. He says, let me introduce you to a few people. He says, I have a gig. He's a freelancer, but he has his own, assignments. And to this day, I still work with him. He still hires me. And so he actually hired me to do an assignment for him. And then he introduced me to 2-3 agencies. The agencies didn't ask any questions. They didn't ask for my credentials. They didn't ask for degrees or anything. They just say, oh, you know him? Okay, well, you could go. So I was in the booth the first time. I didn't even know how it worked. And it just, again, I even loved more in booth than consecutively, obviously. So it just, from then on, it just exploded into a part-time job at first. Yeah. And now I must say that it's, I have another company. I do ventilation, air balancing. And I'm actually thinking of putting that aside to do full-time interpreting now. So it's
great.
Really a
love that story. It's really, really cool how you got started in that. And one of the things that you mentioned to me as well, when we were emailing back and forth, is you said you mastered the ability. I wanted to be able to ask you about this. You mastered the ability to never panic in booth. And as interpreters, we don't know what's going to come. We don't know what's going to come at us. We don't know exactly what's going to be said. Sometimes we get a guide or a manual, which is great, or a program, but not always. So it can be a little bit nerve-wracking, right? Not knowing exactly what's going to come. So as far as your mindset, how do you get prepared, stay prepared, and stay calm?
The biggest keys, we don't hear about that often, but I think it's very important, especially for the new interpreters, is that the first times when I was in the booth, you kind of, you're interpreting, and then you kind of lose that, you lose it, and then you lose a sentence, and then you're trying to figure out the first sentence, but the guy's already in the second sentence and the third, and he's almost a paragraph away, and you're struggling. And at that point, I started sweating beads. I was literally sweating. I would stress out. And then I just realized, you know what? If you can't cry over spilt milk. So sometimes I lose a word. Sometimes I lose a few words. Sometimes I may even lose a sentence if the speakers are very fast. And I just decided, I said to myself, okay, I can do nothing about those lost words. And it's going to be worse if I try to catch up and try to, fix the situation. I'll actually make it worse. And cognitively, I just couldn't take all that. It was an overload. So I just decided, okay, I'm not going to stress over this. If I drop it, I drop the ball, just pick up and keep going and forget it, So I just, at one point, I decided that. And now I'd say it serves me well. And I don't sweat as much. It still does happen, and we're put in circumstances and situations or topics that we've never spoken about before.
Yeah.
Where we don't know the terms very well. I'll still sweat a bead every once in a while, but I managed to stay calm. And so I would say that is one of the key. I remember one instant I was working with another young interpreter. Actually, she was more experienced than I was. And we were in the booth, and this very fast talker came up, speaker. And I could see that on her shift, she was really struggling. She was actually looking at me, and I didn't know the signals at first, and she was like begging for me to take over, and I just turned, I said, okay, you want me to take it? And she said, yeah. And I just had the gift of fast gab, and that really is getting me out of a lot of difficult situations. The fact that I could speak very fast, so I was able to save that situation. That interpreter afterwards, thanked me because they just couldn't catch up anymore. They just couldn't hold on to what was being said. And actually, that same day, I found out that I was being relayed. I knew nothing about relay. Mm-hmm. And I had other booths and other languages that were actually relaying off of me. And they came to me afterwards and said, wow, we really loved the content that you were giving us, because you were giving us a mouthful, not just bits and pieces of sentences. So to this day, those interpreters, they love to do relay off of me because I give them a lot, I wouldn't say filler, but because my décalage is very short, I'm always giving something out there. Yeah. Other interpreters have a décalage that's very long, and they'll give a big gap or a big delay. And I think in doing relay, that gives a harder time to those using the relay, right? Anyway, so that's another interesting story. But definitely staying calm in the booth, staying cool, calm, and collected, I like to say as well, is very important, because you'll just lose it, and then your vendor manager would notice it, and then they won't call you up anymore, right? So. And
one of the questions that I get from time to time from interpreters is, how do I make that transition from being a consecutive interpreter to a simultaneous interpreter? So what kind of tips or recommendations would you make for those interpreters who want to get started in simultaneous? The simultaneous world, I mean, there are some training courses out there. There are some workshops, things like that. There's not really certain credentials for that. But what would you say for someone who wants to really get started?
Well, I'd like to start off by saying that I've never done true consecutive. When I say consecutive, it's more, I like to qualify it as a simul-consec, right? Because when I started in church, I would just tell the speaker, listen, don't give me more than 2 sentences or I'm going to butt in. I'm going to force myself in, and I'll just start talking over you. So I would always tell that to the speaker, and they knew. And you've probably seen this in church, but there's this nice dynamic that happens between the speaker and the interpreter. Yeah. And it's beautiful. It's really like it's anointed, really, right? And you got this energy, this synergy that's going, and it's going back and forth, boom, 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 and it's just like it goes very well. So that's the extent of my consecutive. I was never a note taker, and to this day, I still don't take notes. I do have, on a rare occasion, I have some clients that do require me to do consecutive, but even there, I tell the person 1 sentence, 2 sentence maximum. So that's the extent of my consecutive. Now, I've heard that, both sides. Some people say it's easier to go from consecutive to a simultaneous. Some think it's easier to go from simultaneous to consecutive. For me, I personally think that simultaneous is easier, because you don't have to wait. You could start right away. Your rendition, you don't have to, as soon as it's in your mind.
Remember,
exactly. You don't. Exactly. I think that it's less cognitive overload to do simultaneous. But that being said, I've heard it the other way as well. I've heard this morning in my WhatsApp group, actually, we were talking about that. A student was asking, how do we prepare for consecutive? And one consecutive interpreter was saying, I find actually consecutive easier because it gives you time to think. You're writing down. You can prepare your notes. Right. But I tried that, and I just can't manage to write quick enough of what I need to make an intelligent sentence. So I think that going from consecutive to simultaneous is like so much easier, and it's much more fun. I think less stressful. I believe if you're not a people person, standing in front of a crowd, a lot of Although that being said, I find that a lot of interpreters are extroverts and translators are introverts. It's so funny when you go in, meetings of translators and interpreters, you can recognize them right away. The interpreters, they're in a corner, they're yapping away, they're talking with their hands and they're moving and they're dressed up with colorful, extravagant colors. And then you have the translators, they're in one corner, they're very quiet, beige, black, white, colors, very dark. So it's funny to see that, but definitely I think simultaneous is easier than consecutive.
Yeah, no, I feel the same way. And I think for some people, just simultaneous just comes more natural. And that's what it was like for me too, as being able, because I just kind of trained myself on simultaneous. I was studying to be a court interpreter, and I was doing the Holly Mickelson. I don't know if you've heard of her. I've
heard the name. Yeah,
she does some training courses, and I was listening to the back then cassette tapes.
Yeah,
I had the cassette tapes, listening to those, and it was great for just being able to regurgitate the information. I mean, you could do the same thing with any YouTube video of just play a YouTube video and then just try to speak, right there with them. It's great practice. You can do it with the radio.
I do that too. Yeah. Some people call it mirroring. Some people call it shadowing. I do that. I do it naturally, right? You're watching TV and I'm interpreting. It's as if the switch never turns off.
Yeah.
I can't turn it off. I'm always interpreting. I listen to the radio. I'm interpreting. I'm trying. Oh, this is a subject I don't know. Let me try it. I'm in my mind. I'm driving and I would have trouble with that.
So tell me one of the most challenging scenarios you've been tossed into. I know you mentioned the one with the fast talking preacher.
One of the first times that I was in the booth as well, I was invited to interpret. I had a booth partner and we were interpreting in this big, huge conference here in Montreal. It's, these top-notch executives that are invited to speak about the success, their millions of dollars, sports celebrities, business celebrities, people with big names, right? And we had the prep material in advance, and I was so nervous that I took all the prep material and I translated everything. I worked overnight. Like I basically didn't sleep the night before. I translated on paper everything that I had, bios, messages, the PowerPoints, and I had that all in front of me. And then when my turn came around for one of the speakers, that speaker did not give his speech to us. And he kept repeating, and he was actually one of the speech writers for one of the American presidents. His vocabulary was so rich, so amazing, so in depth. And my level was just like kindergarten compared to what he was saying, right?
Yeah.
And I'm looking for my words. I'm searching for and by default, if something goes wrong, I would use what we call, English, French. He's speaking in English, but I use an English word as a French word, replacing it, because here in Quebec, honestly, most people understand English, back and forth. I mean, it's the two official languages. So I kept using this one word, but I would use the English form while I'm interpreting in French, right?
Yeah.
And then my cell phone on my desk starts vibrating. And she says that my vendor says, get out of the booth. So when my turn came over, switched over to my buddy, I went out. She says, I'm so sorry. She says, I'm not the major, I'm just like, a supplier. She was like, a second in line. And she said, one of the major companies heard you interpret and they don't like your interpreting. They find that you're, not good enough. So they had to call another interpreter, friend of mine that I knew.
Yeah.
And they called her in to replace me. I was heartbroken because at this point I was wondering, okay, maybe this is not for me. This is in the beginning when doing it in the booth. I was like, oh my gosh, maybe I'm in the wrong place. The imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And I wept. I was crying because it really hurt me that, I wasn't prepared. And it just so happened it was for that one speech that I was not prepared for.
More prepared than you've ever been, except for that one individual. Man.
Exactly. So, I mean, that really put a stop. I was really wondering, okay, is this for me? But then I just, okay, get over it. And attached to that story is a funny one too, because that interpreter that came to replace me was a woman friend of mine. Actually, at that time, I didn't know her yet. And we crossed eyes, and she knew she was replacing me because I was doing a bad job, right? So from that point on, every time I would meet that interpreter, I was like, oh my gosh, it's her again. What's she going to think? I must have a bad reputation with her,
Yeah.
And at one point, I even worked with this person in the booth, and I was so ashamed. I felt like I wasn't good enough. And when I would work with her, I would think like, okay, I'm not good enough. I'm not this, I'm not that. And she would, she had a nice spirit about it. She was correcting me or giving me words, slipping the paper to me and all that.
Yeah.
But I was still so ashamed, and I wouldn't talk to her, And then one day we met up in a meet where there was translators and interpreters. And I said, okay, this was like a few years afterwards, I said, I have to go see her because I got to break this tension that we have together,
Yeah.
And I ended up going to her face to face. I said, listen, I said, you remember that time? She says, yes. Did I replace her? She remembered the story vividly. I said, I'm so sorry, And we kind of made friends and connected actually from that. And we even had family connections that we didn't even know about. So I was like, wow. And she turned out to be like, an amazing interpreter. She was an amazing interpreter. But it turned out that I created this tension for nothing. And she was already laughing about it. We were laughing about it afterwards. In the moment, it was done. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, the deposition one was pretty much the hardest one, I would say.
Wow. Yeah. Well, and as interpreters, people don't think about the fact that we are still human. And while we are just as a conduit, taking the language from one to another, we're still right there. And it sometimes can be challenging to remove ourselves from the situation. I remember one time I was interpreting as a medical appointment, and it was for labor and delivery. So I was like, okay, great. I got the call, went in there, I went in the hospital, didn't know any other information at all, just that it was labor and delivery. So I was okay. So I walk in the room and I see the grandmother holding the baby, see the parents sitting on the bed.
Yeah.
And like the nurse was there, and they're like, okay, great. Oh, the interpreter's here. So they started going over some medications for the mom. We start interpreting that. But I noticed the mood in the room was really sort of down. And I thought, hey, they could have been in here for 36 hours. They're probably all exhausted. Right. And so it was interpreting, and then the nurse stepped out of the room real quick. Had to go grab some paperwork, and I was just kind of standing there in the corner. The door was open, and I turned to the parents, and I, just because it just seemed the mood seemed kind of down, and I stepped out of my role for 1 second. I just said, hey, well, congratulations, on your new baby. And they let me know that the baby had passed away. It was a stillborn, and the grandmother. And then I looked closer at the baby the grandmother was holding and the baby was blue, and so. I was just like, wow. Oh my gosh, I felt so terrible, for saying that and for not knowing the situation going in, because we don't know a lot of times what's going to happen, and we have to carry that weight, and then we have to move. And then, like you said, we have to move forward. I think interpreters were the quintessential role of having just to move forward, because if you made a mistake, if you missed a word, and or whatever happened, you got to be able to move on. And it's not always easy, but
wow. Yeah. That's hard. Yeah.
A couple more questions. And then also I want to ask you how people can best connect with you. I know you're well connected on all social media platforms. Where can people best find you?
Best find me, obviously, on LinkedIn, under Mike Lemay.
Okay.
Lemay, Mike Lemay.
Yeah, and we'll put that on the screen too.
On Instagram, it's Mike the Interpreter, one word. And WhatsApp. But if they connect with me on Instagram and on LinkedIn, that's just fine. And my email address is miketheinterpreter@gmail.com, right? So nice and simple. And follow the hashtag Hot Sauce Interpreters.
Hot Sauce Interpreters, bam. There we go. All right, and if you could leave one message for the interpreter community, what would that be?
Wow, I would say that this profession it's an adrenaline rush. It's a roller coaster ride. I love the rush, the adrenaline rush, literally, of going in the booth, coming out of the booth, of feeling like Superman. But other times you feel like really discouraged. You feel like a total imposter, but we all feel that, you get the highs, you get the lows, but a lot of times it's so exciting because you get you get to interpret for very simple stuff, and then you get to interpret, like I got the privilege of interpreting for our prime minister in a conference at one point. It wasn't like put publicly out there, but it was in the conference, and it was like, wow, I got to interpret for the prime minister. And
pretty cool.
And so you get the highs, you get the lows, and you feel good. It's a very you have to be very emotionally strong, because you will hit the lows and you will hit the highs, but you have to balance it out and know that even if you do hit rock bottom, and you will hit rock bottom, there are those times where you really you really goof really bad. And then there's other times where you just come out of the booth and you just like, yeah, man, I just hit it out of the ballpark. And you get the callbacks, and then, you keep getting calls. And so, just continue, keep on keeping on, be brave, be courageous. I like to say, I mean, some interpreters disagree with me, but I like to take a challenge, even if I've never done it before. Some people say, don't touch it. There's some stuff I don't touch. I don't touch legal, I don't touch medical. But anything else, I'm willing to try at least once. And I find that when I've tried it, I was like, hey, I could do this.
Yeah.
And it increases the volume of work that you get, right? So stay calm. Definitely, that's a key. Stay cool, calm, and collective. And know that you're not a dictionary, and it'll never be perfect. Never be perfect. You're always gonna slip up somewhere, but just keep going. In the end of the day, most people will come to see you anyway and say, wow, that was great. I love what you did. And they'll call you back.
Great message.
So
thank you so much for tuning in here with us this morning and being able to learn from Mike, the interpreter, #Hot Sauce Interpreters himself. And if you like this episode and want to share it as well, we would be very, very grateful for that. Share it with your community, and like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and to our podcast. And let us know what other content you'd like to hear, what other guests you'd like to hear. And Mike, it was so great having you on the show today.
It was awesome, man. We had a great time. I can't wait to see it.
Yes.